Now, anything's on the table except for the cards that have already been used. Meta's wide open. Rich, how can you pick a deck in this crucial moment? What do you look for?
Well, when you're doing in-game duels, the decks are pre-built. And here's what I expected last game out of Ian. He decided to go a little bit less predictable, go drill and save bait. He might be doing a double bait here in game number 3. We'll see if that's the direction he goes. And this is what I'm not surprised about, right? And we're seeing two players playing bait after a long time kind of being on the sideline. It's back, and it's strong, and it's dangerous. When you're talking about, though, building these decks, there's a reason why you have your in-game duels, which we're using here today, and which are a lot of the player experience. But in CRL, they use what pro players refer to as normal duels, meaning that you don't do it in-game. You can really choose game by game. Mm-hmm. And they're two very different styles of play. Here you have to really think about your the 4 possible decks that your opponent might do. But more importantly, with an in-game duel set, you're trying to cover, in every deck that you build, you're trying to cover as many of the most powerful options as possible. So instead of building decks that are more precise for specific matchups, you're building decks that cover more ground. And it's a very different game playing in-game duels versus the quote-unquote normal or game-by-game duels.
Sure. And this is a pretty interesting matchup here. We have a bait mirror match, so both decks are going with the bait strategy, but there are some key card differences between them. We've got Evo Skeletons on one side, Evo Valkyrie on the other. Is Evo Valkyrie just an absolute tiebreaker in this matchup, or what do you think?
I think Evo Valk is pretty significant here, especially given that Ian has a few good ways to control that Prince. The big question is, can Sergio pull off some high-quality moments, maybe predicting some of those Prince covers? And here you see it works out well for Sergio, who's continuing to put some big pressure on. But now you have too much value, Dark Goblin and Princess, both being taken down. But as long as you're starting to get that damage chump, that little chip damage over and over again, I like this for Ian, although Prince does counter Valkyrie.
Yeah, that's so interesting because the Prince is going to counter the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie is going to counter pretty much everything else in the deck. This Inferno Tower is going to be a pretty tough, or a pretty big liability in this matchup because, of course, there is no big tank really coming down the middle. All the Goblin Barrels and spells are going around that Inferno Tower.
Princess, that's what I was talking about, was that you have to build these decks in this version of duel mode. Look at that Dark Goblin getting tanked for tons of damage for Sergio and now he's just putting it on like crazy. Snowball to cover, but now the Evo Skellies get free. Fire Spirit has to come out to hold on, and Sergio's putting a lot of pressure on. But back to the point, this is what I was talking about, Seth, is that Ian had to plan for potentially facing that Mega Knight in every deck. So that Inferno Tower is in here because maybe he's going to use that against a Mega Knight in game number 2. And if we hadn't seen Mega Knight played by Sergio Ramos in game number 1, very possible we'd have seen this deck come out in game number 2.
It just shows how rivalries can stretch across generations. Pekka versus Mega Knight. Pekka versus Mega Knight has so thoroughly traumatized the Clash Royale universe that every deck is built for either a Pekka or a Mega Knight.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's experienced this, right? Where you go into a game, right? You're playing Royal Hogs, and your opponent is playing Valkyrie, Mega Knight, Fireball, Bomb Tower, and you're like, did a Royal Hog, like, kill your family? Why are you so obsessed with stopping Royal Hogs? Are you the Batman of Royal Hogs?
But and Sergio Ramos takes the third game with an overtime Goblin Barrel. Would you call this an upset? Because I think this was an incredible performance by a long-time pro